In this video, sponsored by the Army Painter Air Paints, I'll tell you the easy tricks to highlighting and shading your models and terrain with your airbrush. It makes some people nervous, but actually airbrushing is easier than you think. It can seem daunting, for sure, and there are some real pros out there in the miniature painting industry that they can make it look really amazing, and people who've been doing it for a while can be like, I don't even know how you're doing that, you know what I mean? But it's really not that difficult to take some simple baby steps to make your models look much better and make your airbrush worth more of your time. Now, I've talked many times about why using your airbrush for priming is great. For me, specifically, it's two things. Number one, weather. I live in a part of the world where it is either snowing or just stupid cold, or it's crazy humid, or maybe it's raining, and most of you probably live in areas where there's also weather sometimes. Having to not worry about the weather when you want to prime your models is awesome. The other thing I really like about it is the smoothness to airbrush priming, and this is, I guess, 2.5 of my 2 reasons. You use a lot less paint very frequently. Now, generally, my favorite way to do airbrush priming is to do something called a zenithal prime. I've talked quite a bit about that on other videos here on this channel as well. You usually prime the model a very dark color. You get it into all the nooks and crannies. You get it everywhere. Then you use a lighter color, and then you spray from above to simulate the light coming down and hitting the model. Very frequently, that first color is black that you get everywhere, and that second color is white. But it doesn't have to be. You can do a lot of different color variations depending on what you're using, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But zenithal priming with an airbrush, I find, is way better than using a dry brush or using a rattle can for that kind of purpose. And so it's another really good reason that you want to start taking more stock in what you're doing with your airbrush. Okay, so after priming and zenithal priming, what else is there to do with your airbrush? Well, actually, as it turns out, there's a lot of things you can do. Base coloring a model so you don't have to go back after you've sprayed the primer on there and now paint the entire thing blue. Let's say you're painting an ultramarine or something like that, or paint it all brown because it's a big furry monster or whatever. Being able to do that base coloring with the airbrush is really good. Now, you could just spray a color over the top of the primer for sure, but you can also do a lot of things to add in a lot of depth and volume and gradients and fades and shadows and highlights with your airbrush, and it's really not that hard. So to start, it is still very important for you to prime your model. I would generally never just take an airbrush paint or some kind of paint that I've thinned down to airbrush consistency and just start spraying over my plastic or metal or resin. I'm always still going to put some sort of primer on there. And the thing is, not only is the primer there to help the paint stick better to the material, but it's also really there to help it's important to be the right undercolor under what you're going to do next. Sometimes you'll do a bit of a zenithal with the main base color over a dark primer for the shadows. So you prime this model all very dark, and then you're going to spray the color that the model is going to be, whatever it might be, over the top of that. It's generally a bit of a lighter color. And then all of a sudden, you've got dark shadows, you've got kind of, higher base areas, all that kind of stuff. It really works very well. Then a very simple highlight over that base color just makes things look even better. Again, more gradient, more depth, all that kind of stuff. But here's the important thing. You have to be careful with the colors that you use to highlight your base coat. The most important thing is this: finding the right color for your shadows and highlights matched to whatever your base color is. Now again, your base color is not your primer. Your base color is, this is what color the model is going to be. It's an evil wizard with a red cloak. Well, then red's your base color, but you want to have some darker colors for the shadows, and you want to have some lighter kind of highlights for that. What's really important about color is the hue. Now, the hue is the actual color itself, okay? So you could have a green, but it could head towards blue, or it could head towards yellow. You have that kind of like rainbow kind of thing going on with the entire visible spectrum of light, and a color will sometimes skew closer to one side or closer to the other side of any given, spot on that kind of track. So if you use a color that is one particular hue of green, and now you want to highlight that with what you believe to be just a brighter shade of green, it may not be the same hue, and it's going to start to look weird, right? Now, People will also say, well, why can't I just tint or shade the color that I've got? Those people went to art school, most likely. A tint is when you add white to a color to lighten it up, and a shade is when you add black to a color to darken it down. The trick is that we live in the real world, and paints don't always act like art theory. So as you add more light, white paint, let's say, to a hue, it might start to skew into a direction you might not want it to. If you try to highlight red, it'll turn pink. That's not what you want. On the other hand, you might add black to your color, which will start to desaturate the color and then not really make it kind of stand out and be what you're looking for in your shadows. So that's where today's sponsor comes in, the Army Painter Air Paints. Army Painter paints specifically designed for airbrush use. They are hue-matched triads, which means that there's 3 colors, and you'll have a base, a mid, and a highlight, and they're all matched so that if you use this highlight on this mid or on this base, it won't do that weird hue shift, right? Smooth colors that don't clog. I've never had them clog my airbrush. I've been using them just shortly after since they came out last year. I never get any dry tip where you get the stuff stuck at the end of your airbrush and then it makes speckles and goes all over. I don't ever thin them. I just take them straight out of the bottle directly into the reservoir on my airbrush. They work great. The 3 paints of each triad are listed on each of the bottles. So when you look at a bottle, you can go, oh, this is the base, and these 2 other colors are the mid and the high. Or you can pick up a bottle and go, well, this is the mid, and now I know what the high is and what the base is. So you're never kind of trying to figure out what colors are what. They're right there on the bottle, which is very cool. The airbrush paints came out real close to the same time as the speed paints. And I feel like because the speed paints made a lot of news and all kinds of stuff like that, I feel like people are sleeping on the airbrush paints. And I really don't think they should. They are the best airbrush made paints that I've ever used. And they're literally all I ever touch anymore when I'm in my airbrush room looking for opaque paints. Now, here's some tricks. Let's say I want to paint a Space Marine and I want to paint him red. So in this situation, I would start with a dark brown primer to get that warm shadow underneath what I'm going to do next. And then after that, I get it into, again, all the nooks and the crannies. And then I pick up Carmine Red, which is a base color, and then Pure Red, which is a mid color for that triad. Starting with the Carmine Red, I spray a pretty healthy zenithal spray down on the model, making sure to focus on everything that wouldn't be in shadow, like maybe kind of between the legs. He's got a big shield, so kind of under that leg underneath there isn't going to get so much light on it. So I get a little bit of red there, but I get a lot more on the upper parts of his body. Then I sprayed the Pure Red to kind of highlight, again, from above, the areas that would get the most light. Tops of the shoulder pads, top of the backpack, the head, anything that I want the light to hit from above or that I might want to accentuate. Sometimes you will use that not just as this is a light source hitting the model, but sometimes it's something you want people to focus on, usually the face or the head. It's very simple, and now I have a Space Marine that will have mostly red armor that is a gradient from a bright pure red to an Carmine base color down to like warm shadow of the original dark brown primer. And I haven't had to wet blend or glaze anything with my brush or anything like that. It's all airbrush. Now I can start working on all of the other details with my normal regular paintbrush, but the majority of the model is already kind of done. Now again, depending upon the color, other times you might end up actually doing a reverse zenithal or anti-zenithal over a lighter primer to add colored shadows. With this cool robot figure here who is pretty overexposed in my airbrush booth lighting, sorry about that, I started with a white primer and then I sprayed demonic yellow, which is a mid color, up underneath the model. So instead of, the zenithal from above, I'm trying to spray up underneath. This will be kind of step 1 of the shadow part. And you get it into kind of all of the undercarriage areas, but keep the tops, the base color, or the primer color white. Then I used the highlight color for that triad, which is called Imp Yellow, to spray down from above like a standard zenithal would. It's a kind of paler and less saturated bright yellow. Once that was done, I needed more warmth in the shadows because I want this guy to kind of almost look like construction equipment that's been sitting outside getting sun bleached, but he also needs to be kind of grungy. And I could do all that with a bristle brush, regular paintbrush and all that kind of stuff, or I could actually use some Sand Golem speed paint from the Army Painter, drip that into my airbrush, and then spray that up from underneath again, being a little bit more careful this time to just darken the color a touch more. You don't want to go too hard. As always with airbrushing, it's always better to go slow with light coats than it is to go too fast and ruin it. So when it's time to start brush painting on this model, the first thing that I'll do is to put kind of a thinned down sepia wash over everything, and then just go through and start working on details and weathering and all that kind of stuff. But again, the majority of all of the surfaces on this robot are done. Okay, but what about terrain? I generally prefer my terrain to have some subtle gradients to make the walls look a little bit more interesting, even like gray cement. Here I used Regiment Gray, which is a base color, and Uniform Gray, its mid color in that triad, to paint these walls that I had originally primed, again, dark brown. Now again, we're spraying our Regiment Gray from above to keep some of the dark brown primer in the recesses where the rebar is all exposed and there's cracks in the wall and all that kind of stuff. Also, I'm spraying a little bit less as I get further down on the wall to where the wall kind of hits the ground, as buildings usually have a tendency to get kind of dirtier at the bottom. The rain falls down, splashes up the mud, that kind of stuff. You've probably seen it. Once that's done, we can then either try to do a brighter kind of linear gradient with the highlight color, so almost like as if it's just fading from top to bottom, again, in this case with Uniform Gray, or what I usually prefer to do with buildings is to do something that's more like a vignette. If you've ever used like Instagram or any kind of photo software stuff where you've got all the cool little looks and the different things you can do, many times what a vignette is I have a picture and I kind of darken around the edges, right? And what that does is it draws the eye in on the subject. Well, you do sort of the opposite here on your wall, your big wall piece, to make it a little bit more interesting. Instead of doing a top-down gradient, what I like to do is paint the thing, like I said, with the previous color, and then take the lighter color and start in the middle and kind of make circles. And what I'm doing is I'm making it, instead of adding dark around the edges, I've painted the thing dark and I'm now highlighting in the middle. It gives a more visual interest to the wall, like sun's hitting it, but it's not as much of a gradient straight down from above. It doesn't look, I think, as technical. It looks a little bit more organic, and it's not hard to do as long as you kind of go slow. Then use your highlight color on the tops of the walls and other features. And again, you're nearly done with most of the model when it comes time to go in and start, working on details with your regular brush and maybe do some dry brushing and stuff like that. They have 3 air paint sets to choose from. There's a starter, a mega, and then the massive complete set, which has got fluorescent colors in it and a bunch of metallics and all kinds of stuff. But you can also buy the bottles singularly as well. You can either get them at your local shop that carries the Army Painter, or if you don't have a local shop that carries the Army Painter products, you can also find their paints a lot of places online or even order direct from thearmypainter.com. They're honestly my favorite airbrush paints because they're good quality and easy to use, and having them in matched triads makes shading and highlighting incredibly easy. So don't be afraid to try more than just priming your models with your airbrush or just doing simple white to black zenithols on your models. If you can do a simple zenithal fade, then you can highlight and shade your models and your terrain to give them more depth and visual interest, especially if you use the right paints. I hope you learned more to make you happier with your airbrush that you've already got, or maybe now you'll decide to get one for yourself to really start moving ahead with your miniatures and your terrain. It's really not as hard as you might think. If you like this video, you can click the little like thing down below. It really helps the channel and I'd appreciate it. If you want to subscribe, that button's right down in that same area as well. Thanks for watching.